Greetings, shippers! This video has been a long time coming. Not only has it been long requested, but it was the winner of the June video vote on Patreon, guaranteeing it the final June spot. It's Superbat, the pairing of Clark Kent aka Superman and Bruce Wayne aka Batman. Before we dive in, if you want to get involved helping determine videos, head on over to Patreon and join in the monthly vote, and also see some behind the scenes stuff and whatever else I happen to post on there. And if not, no worries, just sit back and enjoy Superbat. Now both Batman and Superman have become iconic in the cultural landscape, and both were instrumental in the dawn of the superhero age, with Superman first appearing in 1938, with Batman following in 1939, as a direct result of Superman's popularity. The simplicity of these characters, particularly in terms of their initial origins and motivations, made them easily identifiable for audiences, and they managed to tap into something primal, proving able to withstand not only the test of time, but also worm their way into the collective subconscious, both surviving key moments in comic history, such as the decline of superhero popularity following World War II, and both emerging as two of the most popular comic book characters of all time. With their popularity came a certain demand, fueled in part by fan engagement but largely by marketability. What would happen if these two met? While the industry teased a team-up for years, with the two appearing on covers together as early as 1941 on the publication World's Finest Comics, with their first ever joint cover appearing on a promotional comic in 1939. For years after, the two would appear on these covers, and yet inside would be independent solo adventures, as you could play faster and looser with how reflective of the content the cover was. And technically it was accurate, they were both in the book, just not in the same story. These two actually had their first meeting in a Superman story in 1952, though they had shared a panel in an All-Star story previously. This meeting in the Superman comic and its success led to them appearing in joint adventures in the ongoing title World's Finest, starting in issue 71 in 1954, and the two remained a staple in the book until its cancellation in 1986, 323 issues in. The two were actually featured there more prominently than in the Justice League, of which they were officially founding members. The success of this title confirmed the popularity of this duo amongst fans and translated into near guaranteed profits. But what about the relationship between these two? Well, it has shifted as much as they have. So before we look at the history of their relationship, let's look at them both as individuals. Starting with the big blue Boy Scout himself, Clark Kent. Superman has had an interesting trajectory personality-wise, despite the fact that many find him boring. Clark is a character driven to be a hero out of a sense of optimism and duty. The powers he has been granted are seen as a force for good, and that indeed he has a responsibility to do good with them. This strong moral drive is presented as the direct result of his traditional upbringing from parents who sought to instill him with core values, always there to course correct when he strayed from the path and risked becoming selfish. Clark's alien heritage was kept from him till later in life, his teens in most iterations, though this element is one that is often played with. As a result, Clark walks a line of feeling both of the world and not of it. How much that bothers him varies from generation to generation and writer to writer, some feeling that his powers and Kryptonian heritage would make him feel extremely distant and make it hard for him to connect with regular people, while others feel his upbringing as a human boy would override that, giving him an understanding and a fondness for people that would make blending and relating relatively simple, as his powers do not define him. At least, some do not feel they do. Either way, Clark is earnest, kind, and more intelligent than he often gets credit for. He approaches situations from a position of optimism and hope, though he can of course get down like anyone else. At his core, he strives to do good and walk a tightrope of helping humanity without becoming overbearing or overstepping his own self-imposed boundaries, as well as the ones that the world places upon him. It is these core conflicts that, while extremely interesting, can be a bit difficult to write for some. As a result, if only his powers are focused on, since he is in many's view overpowered, he can be perceived as boring, as his narrative conflicts are at their strongest when they come from a place of introspection and attempting to balance his humanity with his otherness. Although some simply find the fact that he is genuinely good to be boring, which may be part of why exploring alternate, more dark or straight up evil Superman is such a popular narrative trope, and it can be done very well, but that can only occur as a contrast to his original image. However, there are those who disagree with this assessment and feel instead that Superman has always had some, let's say, jerkish tendencies, and that these are traits he would have to learn to overcome. However, this is not the most accepted view of his character. Since he has been around for so long, there are many ways to interpret Superman around his core character, and his popularity waxes and wanes depending on the surrounding cynicism of the environment in which he finds himself. Batman, on the other hand, is a character who can thrive in both idealistic and dark times. Bruce Wayne comes to be a hero in a much different way, While Clark is encouraged by the good of the world to preserve it, Batman sees the dark it has to offer and seeks to protect others from it. Everyone knows the story. Orphaned from a young age, Bruce Wayne channels his need for vengeance into a mission for justice, dedicating himself to his obsession, living a life of rigid control and duality. In contrast to Clark's emotional openness, Bruce is much more guarded, and his dedication to his mission can on occasion make him harsh. Yet he cares deeply about people, even if he is not good at expressing it, unsure of how to fully relate to them, yet still forming deep bonds with them. Batman is a darker hero, willing to use tactics a lot closer to the line, also occasionally veering towards paranoia. Over time, writers have played with exactly how sane Batman truly is in contrast to the villains he faces, as well as the Bruce Wayne as an actual person versus Bruce Wayne as a mask constructed to protect Batman. Like the alienated Clark, both have their roots within Batman's core character and have their own merits narratively. Both characters have stuck within the minds of readers and eventually viewers as they came to be adapted into different mediums. This was in part due to the simplicity of their ideologies, making them easy to identify with / look up to, both fighting on the same mission for justice, but approaching it in different ways and motivated by different factors. Essentially, people like to imagine themselves as these characters, or at the very least, in their world, and experience that enhanced in richness when the two were placed together. Like their shifting / evolving personalities, over time the history of these two's relationship has similarly changed. Originally, these two's partnership was unmarred by conflict. They were both heroes who recognized the other as such and felt they could serve the other and aid the citizenry by working together, quickly forming a fast friendship, cemented in the flowery prose and silliness of the Silver Age. Their first meeting is utterly adorable, with the two being assigned to the same room on a cruise ship and having to change when trouble arises, which results in each learning the other's secret identity. However, there is no time to deal with that as they must save the ship. Afterwards, they vow to keep each other's secrets and team up in one of the Golden and Silver Age Superman's favorite pastimes, deceiving Lois Lane. Their adventures continued through the Silver Age, which was more concerned with telling interesting and zany stories than furthering intense character development, although many of the events and tropes from that era would inform the characters forever. Also, the stories would slowly change as the comic moved through the different eras in the industry, as comics themselves shifted towards a more character-driven narrative base, and this included the introduction of conflict, at first appearing as one-off stories. As a result of all of this, there is many a hyperbolic panel for shippers to enjoy, as the writers would express how close these two are with a genuine earnestness that comes across as very cheesy and occasionally laughable to a modern reader, but is sweet nonetheless. However, over time, the simplicity of this friendship changed alongside the style of comic book storytelling, and an increased desire from both fans and creative staff to see these two come into conflict arose. It began to be noted that while the two heroes had many similarities, they also had their fair share of differences, particularly in methods, approach, and attitude to crime. In fact, in some ways, on the surface, they were polar opposites, differences that could potentially bring them into conflict. As they evolved as characters, Batman maintained the roughness with which he handled criminals, while Superman became more gentle and less willing to frighten. Clark at the same time began to become more sanctimonious, while Batman became more pragmatic, and as mentioned, more paranoid. This distrust of others would eventually extend to Clark, surrounding traits like his powers and extend to his alien nature from which they derived, while Clark would come to occasionally question Bruce's grip on sanity and become concerned over his treatment of other heroes, particularly his sidekicks. As these changes occurred and World's Finest ended, the opportunity arose for these two to re-meet post-Crisis on Infinite Earths. This new meeting would form the new blueprint for these characters' relationship, laying down a foundation both in canon and fandom alike. This new first meeting, taking place in John Byrne's Superman run, involved the two first coming into conflict and coming to respect each other through their initial team-up, rather than on the basis of the other's reputation within the superhero world. Through this, not only was their popularity within fans reinforced, but as was the profitability of letting the two fight, as one of the great questions of comic fandom has always been who would win in a fight, Batman or Superman. This desire to
let them fight
persists to this day, but unlike other characters, it is balanced with their history of friendship that fans also enjoy. Hence, the two are in a situation where fans want both. They want to see these two fight, but at the end, they want to see them be friends. although of course there are fans who only want one or the other. As a result, over the years not only have the conflicts grown more intense, but so have the resolutions. For every battle is an even grander showing of friendship and trust. From Clark entrusting Bruce with kryptonite in case he ever goes rogue, to Bruce's heartfelt confessions of admiration for Superman as a friend and as an inspiration. These two are as close as ever, coming together and breaking apart in the distinctive pattern that characterizes the modern era of comics, where the status quo is often played with but quickly reset. So that is their canon history. But what about Superbat, the romantic fan pairing? Where did it come from? Well, firstly, it must be noted that Superbat is rather unique in the realm of shipdom, in that it can be argued that awareness of it surpasses the number of people who actually ship it. Not that it is unpopular, but it is one of those rare ships that can be seen within the public sphere and has been played with in what can be deemed official works of fandom. Indeed, even in canon, the ship has been acknowledged a variety of ways, such as with the characters Midnighter and Apollo, known Superman and Batman analogs in an openly gay, stable relationship. Although those two are now also active within the Batman and Nightwing portions of the DC universe, so the analogy is a bit less pointed than when they were separated under the Wildstorm branch of DC. So why ship these two? A lot of it comes from their history of intense closeness, that when read through a certain lens becomes extremely homoerotic, regardless of whether or not that was the intent at the time. The lack of overt discussion surrounding this passionate relationship has led fans to extrapolate upon it and fill in the gaps. Although yes, characters will occasionally comment on how close they are, it isn't something that's overly analyzed. While this ship has undoubtedly been around for a while, it saw a significant growth in reach with the arrival of what many deem their favorite of these two's many meetings, that being the Batman-Superman movie World's Finest from 1997. Comprised of 3 episodes from the Superman animated series, this film showcased the meeting of the two heroes from the DCAU, the DC animated universe, that redefined these characters for an entirely new generation. Gone was the campy Batman of the 60s, replaced with a nuanced, brooding, caring, driven figure. While Superman was more familiar, he was presented to a wider range of people through this animated children's series, and was made to be both relatable, funny, and fallible. This meeting encapsulated parts that people have come to expect from their first encounter: initial distrust, both of them being kind of jerks initially to one another, both grandstanding and showing off their respective powers, and ultimately coming together, forming a unique bond different than the one they share with other heroes, often stemming from the fact that their meeting is often used as the catalyst for all the others. Like their actual history, they are the first heroes and the first truly iconic friends. Another key factor for this meeting was the timing of it, namely the 90s. The 90s was an era that supported a huge boom for shipping and fandom culture thanks to the rise of casual internet usage and access, meaning a large increase in fan communities and content, allowing fans to share their works and ships unlike ever before. It also allowed for a new simplicity in research regarding past events in comics. It was becoming easier to track the history of these characters without having to physically have the comics in one's hand, or be in the direct know or know somebody in the know. Key events and moments began to be shared, and as a result, the pairing was enriched, becoming a meld of not only what was occurring in the animated series and comics at the time, but also informed by key moments in the characters' histories. So gems like World's Finest, issue 294, wherein Clark cries because Bruce won't come to the phone after they've had a fight, are no longer hidden from the world, which is just wonderful. This is another phenomenon that makes this pairing stand out. It is not confined to one medium, nor are the fics limited to one source. Fiction from an animated series or comic or film can contain elements from multiple different sources and histories, making for a very unique experience. This can also be based on how familiar a fan is with a multitude of histories of these characters. Perhaps as a result of how iconic these characters are, fandom works about this pairing are shared more freely online, and cross the bow of non-shippers more often because of it. So what works about this pairing? Well, there are many different ways to ship these two because of all the sources and the different ways one can view their personalities. There are, however, some general factors that tend to carry through the majority. As mentioned, Batman is a rather guarded and broken individual who, even within canon, is simultaneously drawn to and distrustful of Superman's more positive nature. Many shippers enjoy a Batman coming to be a more complete person and learning to trust at least slightly more thanks to Clark, while others who enjoy a more whole Bruce who is capable of, say, being a father to his many wards, they imagine him looking for some adult companionship and finding it in Clark. The two are equals in terms of authority, and are often granted this equality by fans regardless of their power differential because of how large they both loom in the comic sphere. As such, it is believed and is portrayed that the two have a special bond and deep trust, sharing secrets with each other and trusting the other with their lives. Both will seek advice from the other, albeit reluctantly at times, and neither is afraid to put the other in check when it is required. There are subtle things that cue shippers as well. The fact that Superman can make Batman laugh, a feat in and of itself. The parallels between the two that allow Bruce to be a little lighter when around Clark and Kal a little darker in reverse. The idea that they both can be themselves with each other, something neither Clark, Bruce, Batman, or Superman, but a fusion of both. Now they also both share the bond of fatherhood. Though Superman operated as a surrogate father figure for two of the Robins, yes, two Robins, since some stories people assume happened with Dick actually occurred with Jason. In fact, he's interacted with most of Bruce's wards, and Superboy if you count Young Justice. This opens up whole new possibilities of the two co-parenting / giving each other advice. Which one is better at it? It's up to you, and really depending on which canon you're working with, it can go either way. Some ship it simply because with all the material and their history of closeness, it is easy, and simpler still to see those bonds of close friendship evolving into something else. And material for shippers just keeps on coming. For those who want to see some of this practically in action, check out the Superman / Batman series that ran from 2003 to 2011, wherein the two often had corresponding speech bubbles that would finish each other's sentences, despite highlighting their opposing worldviews. The relationship changes and is shown through more and more different eyes as former fans and comic enthusiasts get into the industry and begin to tell their own stories based on their own takes on the characters. For some, this ship is easy. As the two say themselves, they fit together like a hand and a glove. So with all this history and friendliness, why not ship it? Well, as always, there are many reasons. Everyone views this relationship differently, and it wouldn't be so easy to make these two fight if they didn't have things to fight about. For some, their personalities are too dissonant, and they have a hard time imagining them working together often, let alone being friends. Many find Batman abrasive and subscribe to the narrative he will find himself alone, driving away those he cares about. Others view Clark as more aloof, too distant at his core to connect with anybody truly, or perhaps he couldn't get past his disdain for Batman's methods, while some view some of the events and betrayals that have occurred between the two as things they couldn't come back from. Others enjoy them in other pairings. These two actually have a lot of support for their canon ships, which is rare, Clark with Lois and Bruce with Selina, not to mention other pairings that have been tossed fans' way either, involving not only Wonder Woman, but other characters. Some, as always, would prefer they remain friends and point out that any male friendship seems to be romanticized and sexualized within fandom and are confused by it, pointing to the same argument that many who are not fans of some female queer ships point out, that being why can't people be close without transforming into something more? The question looms larger in this case as male-male pairings dominate fan culture, making up the majority of works. Why that is complex and not fully known and would derail us completely, so we'll save it for another time. Aside from all this, some simply don't see it, feeling that this is a case of what some like to call shipping goggles. And what are those?
Try these on. Put these on. Hey! Put on the glasses. Take a look. Put them on.
Although this sentiment is shared by many who are perplexed by a ship, others think it's too obvious. The two biggest characters ship together. They want something more nuanced or complicated to conceive. Despite the fact that this pairing can be interpreted in many different ways, and not all are light and fluffy, there is many a dark fic with dark Batman or Superman to be found. In fact, while many didn't have the most positive things to say about Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, the fics pairing those two from that work very hard to improve upon what was there, and there are some really strong showings of Superbat to be seen. Oh fickers, is there no fix it too great? Probably not. Despite not being the unquestioned overlord of the DC shipping fandom, Superbat is an integral part of it, and very well known and well loved by those who do ship it. The care taken with the fandom works, such as the art and the intricacy of the stories, is really something to behold. If one ships it, it's a large rabbit hole to fall down. Don't expect to surface for a while. The friendship of these two characters is as integral to them as the desire to see them fight. Thankfully, with these two, you get both, as canon has deemed that these two are key components or at least significant to each other's lives. How do you guys like your Batman and Superman? Are you Superbat shippers, or do you prefer your Dark Knight and Man of Steel as close friends or even enemies? Share your thoughts down below. Also, for realsies, there will be shippable moments of these two. I know, I can be slow on those, but I've got 2 more supernatural ones coming. It's happening. I'm nothing if not dedicated. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Thanks so much for watching. Special thanks to all my patrons for supporting and for voting. As always, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Check out social media to stay up to date, and as always, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.